Good morning, everybody, and welcome once again to IGTV. With me today is Mark Capus, and Mark will be talking about identity and access management products. You know, Mark, it sounds like we keep covering these areas over and over again. It almost seems like 6 years ago when we were discussing the very same thing at John Jay College in Manhattan. All right, and I think at that time IBM had the strong offering in that particular place. Identity management. It just stuff never goes away, huh?
And sadly, it doesn't. And as we see the evolution of these tools and the evolution of technologies, I think organizations tend to forget that you've got to embed this stuff into the life cycle of your technology. So we're kind of forced to revisit it with every new tool. I think the not necessarily tipping point, but certainly kind of a game changer now is a lot of these tools, because the interoperability between all these systems and the ability to provision between systems with the more mature, Active Directory protocols and X400, X500 is now really allowing businesses to refocus on their core processes. And so what I thought I'd talk about today is things to be aware of as you're tackling these things, because I'm certainly seeing a lot of big organizations in the last 2 or 3 years really start to talk about putting in identity and access management and using it as an enabler in a lot of areas. Certainly, some of the areas that it's attractive to organizations is it allows you to start doing cost constrainment around reducing number of calls to the help desk, making things a little bit more self-service, so you can kind of reduce your SA footprint and put your SAs doing more important things for you than user move add changes and password resets. You're getting a better return on investment because you're integrating your core business automation tools, things like SAP, PeopleSoft, other what would normally be big mainframe, P&L and general ledger apps. You're integrating that into your Active Directory systems, your proxy, your network access, so that becomes a lot more seamless, trying to get people towards, things like single sign-on or reduced sign-on, and making everything a cohesive user experience. For security professionals, it's a nice thing to have because it helps you move the access rights for your data closer to your data owner. So the theory is that, your data owners, the people who create and use your data, ought to know best about who should be accessing it and who shouldn't be accessing it. So if you can federate that and delegate it to the actual managers and the data creators, you're in a better situation as far as securing it, rather than just relying on a systems admin for Windows or Unix sticking a finger in the air and going, well, this directory name says finance, so maybe I only want to restrict it here. It also, with all the new regulations that we're dealing with across your particular verticals, it helps you improve your auditability, because if you have a single tool that manages your identity provisions as well as tracks your password policy and implements those standards across all your systems, it's much easier to audit than have to go out and click box every single system. So typically with most initial big IAM efforts, you've got 3 sort of areas of focus. You've got an identity repository, which basically it's, how do you do your internal and external user authentication. It's a central repository of all your identities, of anything interacting with any of your systems, and it helps you embrace the meta directory concept. So you can kind of feed a master directory, and then that sort of provisions out into your systems. You've got the access management piece, which provides a common security authentication and authorization mechanism. This helps you manage all the access policies for all your systems. It helps you administer your security rights, even on legacy systems. A lot of the tools now are really great about working backwards with some of the other longer lifecycle legacy systems. And it also is a huge aid if you're trying to deploy strong authentication, especially two-factor. because as not all these systems really like two-factor, a lot of these IAM tools will allow you to redirect that authentication to other tools to get you the level of authentication that you desire or you require. And it also helps with user account provisioning, because now you've got one place that you do user account provisioning, and you can leverage, your record of authority with HR if you've got an SAP application, or, an HR system that has all of your employee identification. You can use that as the record of authority to then go back and say, well, rather than that, get a trouble ticket saying, John Doe just came into the organization, and I got to go make 15 J Doe user IDs. You can do it in one place, or actually when they do it, it pops up. They can redirect it to you, and you can actually go create it, and it'll go off and kick off and spawn all the IDs you need. And it also helps you because the same tools you can push out into your user community for self-service functionality, especially around password resets, which helps reduce your reliance on your help desk.
Can I ask you a question, Mark?
Sure can.
All right. I don't want to break your theme up here, and I know you've got some notes and all of that, but if I recall correctly, in the very beginning of all this, with Federated Identity and the setup on here, from what I understand, was identifying the number set that you were going to bring in. In other words, employee ID numbers, dates of birth, tax numbers, all these different. Has that been sorted out any better yet, or is that almost ad hoc per company what the schema is that they're going to develop? Because when we start talking about this ID registry and the central depository, that seems to be the where the honey is.
Yes, that's definitely kind of the Rubik's Cube of the problem. And unfortunately, there's no vanilla out. All these tools have some vanilla out-of-the-box schemas and suggestions.
Okay.
And that's one of the areas that, IAM is a very, very tricky thing to do. And a lot of companies are running towards it, and it's not just a technology fix. One of the things I'm certainly going to stress, I'll stress it now and I'll stress it later, is IAM projects are, I'm a very tool agnostic guy anyway, but IAM even makes that more so, because you got to focus on your business processes, understand your requirements, and understand that there's people and culture involved. So it's one of these projects, again, you got to get all your stakeholders involved and decide, okay, who owns which parameter. Say you have a user schema, who owns which parameter, what becomes a record of authority for that, how is that then provisioned from that system? Right. So in some cases, a lot of these tools, they'll have a master database, but a lot of the database is just pointers to other systems to say, okay, all right, we're gonna have all the unique identifiers for like system logons, and it's not just users you have to remember. You have to identify your applications. If the application runs as a user or has a system entity, you've got to tackle that in this, because you're going to want to manage that access through there, as well as, for a given user, JDO, if there were, physical locations, telephone number, social security number, etc., you might have one or two different systems that you need to point that to. Maybe there's a real estate system for where people sit versus, the HR system for their actual core information.
Right.
And then you have to make sure that you secure those sources appropriately with the privacy regulations. So this is getting back into understanding your regulations. Not only do you have to understand your regulations from an audit perspective of how you're going to use this tool to help you audit, but when you're creating the tool, you also have to understand, okay, how do I need to protect the data within the tool? And that can lead you down a bunch of different rabbit holes, I'm afraid.
No. I didn't want to throw you off your game, and I know you prepare a lot for this, Mark. So I wanted to respect that.
No worries. I'm happy to make this as interactive as possible.
Yeah, the whole thing with this, and I do remember. I think it was I wanted to say Tripoli, but it wasn't Tripoli. I think it was Tivoli.
Tivoli.
What?
Yes, Tivoli,
Yeah.
system management system.
Right, right. And we went back and forth on that. I think we went back and forth on that 3 separate meetings at John Jay, because everybody was trying to wrap their heads around it. And the big thing was, okay, if I bring Joe in, how am I going to provision him in? Am I going to provision him in under his employee ID number? Well, if my database gets hacked, then they've got those numbers. Am I going to bring him in under his date of birth? Well, who don't want to do that? His social security number? No. Want to stay away from that. So then, were they going to be making up a whole nother schema of numbers? And how is that going to, comport into the whole? So this isn't as straightforward as a lot of people may think out there.
Absolutely not.
And very complex.
The heavy lifting here is your business processes, because part of the goal of IAM is you're trying to institutionalize probably partially manual processes and disparate processes to get a cohesive end-to-end process for something like a user provisioning. And if you have a bad process, or you have a broken process, or a lot of times parts of the process won't be documented. You just know, okay, well, I got to call Sheila in HR. She's going to do the actual user add in the HR system, and then she's going to send me an email telling me I've got to add them to the NT domain. And you've got to actually account for that when you're trying to automate it. And if you have bad processes, you're going to propagate more broken stuff throughout your organization. And that's where these things start falling over. And, you'll see companies go through a couple of vendors actually before they get it right, because they'll bring somebody in to do a piece of it, and if they haven't gotten their requirements right and they haven't got their arms around the thing, they'll throw it in, they'll turn it on, and it will fall over with a spectacular crash. Not necessarily for the systems, but just the processes will be so broken that, there'll be even more wacky workarounds involving, harried phone calls and Post-it notes.
Well, go ahead. I didn't mean to get in the middle of your thing there.
No problem. But again, if I come across something that somebody has an interest in, even if you see something come up on the chat, please stop me. I'll be happy to talk about it. So we were talking about having that single point of control, and if you do this right, part of the idea also is it improves your level of protection and risk avoidance for the enterprise, because now you actually know where all the pieces are, and they'll be documented, and hopefully you will have protected those databases appropriately. And that's when you talk about user schemas, that's a good example, because if you have an HR system with their social security number, or date of birth and other things that ID thieves like, part of the idea of the IDM system should be, that system can pull records from that HR system, but you only want to give it authority to pull maybe the name and the telephone number of the office desk. So that's part of developing those things and really doing your homework first. We found that in our IAM practice for our clients, 80% of the work was up front, doing requirements gathering, interviewing stakeholders, and understanding those business processes. And I mean, even when we just did the raw tool selection within our data centers, it was about a 6 months process to integrate that with all the standard idle tools that we were currently using.
Mark, what I'm going to do is I'm